The Walt Disney Company dropped their first fiscal quarter of 2022's data just Wednesday afternoon after the market close, and they were a surprise to Wall Street, a very good surprise. Not only was park revenue way ahead of expectations, operating income, even Disney Plus subscribers, everything across the board pretty much was very good. Good news for the company and good news for CEO Bob Chapek. Now, of course, as many of you out there have called to my attention and have probably seen yourselves, that there has been some movement on places like Reddit to try to vote Bob Chapek off of the board of directors coming up at the annual investor meeting next month. It's not going to happen, folks. Just take my word for it. I appreciate people wanting to be engaged and people wanting to vote their conscience as things go, but you're talking about going after a behemoth at this point. And things are going well for Disney, to be perfectly fair. So I want to talk about some of this stuff today, and I have, as always, for these kinds of discussions, my buddy Cameron Pasha will join us. Stick around. We're going to get into this right now. Renegade Online. Well, welcome back, folks. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. Good to see everybody again. And if you are like one of the 60 or 70+% of folks out there watching one of these videos that are not yet subscribed, please make sure you go ahead and hit that subscription button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, do that like button thing, and of course, leave a comment before you head out the door today. Before I get to Cameron, I want to set some of these numbers up because I think this is important to understand, like always, some of the data before we get into some of the deeper discussions. Now, I'm not going to go into a bunch of boring financial data line by line. It's a 20-page report, so I want to hit the key points, the parks and Disney Plus, and then Cameron and I, I'm sure, will talk about some other issues as we get into our conversation. But from this article here, The Motley Fool, Disney crushed earnings, but is the magic gone? It's a good question, and it actually takes into account several things that I talked about in a few previous videos over the course of the last few weeks. One of them about the economics of Disney theme parks. I'll leave a link to that video in this video in the description below. Check that out because it was funny. During the earnings call on Wednesday afternoon, Bob Chapek even talked about the price elasticity of Disney and how even maybe Disney itself underestimates the elasticity that they have. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch that video because that is exactly what I posited to the audience there, is that Disney has a ton of price elasticity, more so than most people give it credit for. I think even Disney itself, I think even some of the analysts out there, they expected 20.8, they got 21.82. It was a beat. They expected 7 million total Disney Plus subs added, they got almost 12, a huge beat. Total Disney Plus subscribers now stand just shy of 130 million as of the close of the fiscal quarter, which would have been December 31st of 2021. And if we go down here, this is the big one, the parks. This is what really got folks excited besides just Disney Plus, and that was the Disney Parks experiences and products, everything across the board under that one banner that they report. And this is quarter year-over-year comparisons. So the first fiscal quarter of the fiscal year of 2018, which would have been December 31st of 2017 when that quarter closed, total revenue $6.53 billion. Fiscal 19 quarter one, again, this would have been December 31st, 2018, $6.82 billion, then $7.58 billion at December 31st of 2019. December 31st of 2020, $3.59 billion. Of course, this is in the midst of the lockdowns and things like this, so that was expected. But look at this. The quarter that they just reported, ending December 31st of 2021, $7.23 billion. They are almost right back to where they were before the pandemic lockdowns started. That is incredible. And the parks are still not at the same capacity and attendance levels that they were back at that point. In fact, one of the things that Bob Chapek said on the call was that the international visitors are still largely not back yet because of travel restrictions. And international visitors to theme parks, of course, spend on average much more than domestic visitors do. Think about it. They fly in, they come from overseas, they're here, they're not going to be back here for a long time. For a lot of them, it's a once-in-a-lifetime trip. They spend a lot more money because this is it. This is their one shot, right? Look at the operating margins. Look at the operating incomes. It's stunning. And this goes into what I pointed out in the intro to this video, this whole issue about Bob Chapek being voted off the board and all this kind of stuff, or not being renewed next year as CEO. I said it before, I'll say it again. Short of him lighting a fire to Cinderella's castle and burning it down on camera while he laughs with the can of gasoline in his hand, he's not going anywhere. He's doing his job and turning a tremendous amount of revenue, much more than anybody expected to happen at this point for Disney coming out of the pandemic era lockdowns. So take that into account. Now, I want to go down here and I want to focus on this article because this also brings up some issues that I discussed before. Has Disney crossed the line? And it's talking about the penny pinching practices that we see in the parks, okay? And I know a lot of folks out there have been talking about this. A lot of folks have lamented it. I hear you. I understand it. And I agree. I get where you're going. My point is that I've said before in that same video about Disney Park Economics 101, there is a reason for them doing it, and it's simply because they can. Backlash against Disney CEO Bob Chapek, who replaced Iger about 2 years ago, is strong. This is an opinion part. Some argue that Walt Disney would be turning over in his grave if he were to see his company's priorities shift from imagination to profit. Again, this is opinion. However, as my colleague argues, long lines at Disney parks indicate that demand is outpacing supply. What did I tell you in that video before? And for that reason, Disney could raise prices even further. I said that too. It would up the cost, but it would also improve the experience at the parks. In the process, however, and I acknowledge this as well, it would also make going to Disney parks even more unaffordable for the middle class, which goes against the vision that Walt Disney wanted. Now, again, some of that is true. Some of that is opinion, editorialized opinion, and it's all fine and dandy for the points of academic discussion. I'm not here to say right or wrong. I'm just here to make it clear that this is the author's opinion in this piece from The Motley Fool. Disney isn't at a crossroads. The magic is not gone, is what he says, but I would submit a word of caution towards investors who are celebrating Disney's blowout quarter. Keep your eyes and ears open to the attitudes of Disney customers towards management's strategies. Reading Disney blogs, subreddits, or viewing Instagram pages can be a Peter Lynch-style grassroots approach to monitoring Disney's customer satisfaction. Now, I'm not going to go into who Peter Lynch is. You are welcome to Google that name, learn a little bit about it. Very smart guy. That said, this is what they're going at, here is that, and we've talked about this a little bit, and Cameron and I are about to have this discussion, is that yes, you can raise prices. Yes, Disney has a tremendous amount of price elasticity, more than even I think that they thought that Bob Chapek acknowledged that Wednesday. But there is a limit to that, of course. And as I said before, Disney is trying to find that point on the scale right now of where that is, that risk versus reward, that price versus supply demand, all that has to come together. We talked about that with the Galaxy's Edge Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel, right? High price tag. And then when people saw what they were getting for it, the cancellations began. So here we go. Let's bring in Cameron.
Well, I mean, I think as someone who wants Disney to succeed and to be both financially and creatively successful, I'm glad to see we're on this road. The stock rallied, I believe, at least 3% yesterday on the news, and it's a good sign. And for me, as someone who is a supporter of Susan Arnold and Bob Chapek and what their long-term plan is for Disney, this is wonderful news. I think we're getting back on track. I know we can, and we can, in the process of discussing financials, talk about some of the creative choices, but there's been a lot of passion in the last few days around creative choices, around Book of Boba Fett and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I want people to understand that's the past. That's the leftover from Iger's regime. We're now beginning to see where Chapek is leading us, and he's starting off strong. He's gotten us onto a good, solid footing, and that's going to also be guiding the creatives. We'll talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you and I have said this many times, that it's going to take a year or two at least, I would say, at least from the standpoint of the film and television production type stuff, before we see what's really going on now, because it takes a while to bring that to fruition. And look, you're right. Some people really liked the last episode of the Book of Boba Fett, or the show as a whole.
I did.
I know, yeah,
you did, and I may be in the minority, but I did.
Well, I don't know if you're necessarily in the minority. I mean, it's just, look, I mean, I know a lot of us on YouTube, we talked about it. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I was kind of in the middle with the meh. I have some questions. I wish they would have done some things differently, but it's more the stuff like the fight choreography. We did a video on that the other day. And I mean, that's for another thing. But look, and that's just it. We can all, you know, we can love or hate something and still sit here and be friends and talk about it. And it's not a big deal at the end of the day. But we'll have another conversation on that topic. But let's talk about, you know, maybe what we're looking at here with Disney going forward. You know, we've got the parks. They've been raising prices. You have some people that obviously, some people are not going to like that, but Disney is always looking at this from the standpoint of, well, if we can raise prices and we can still have X number of people coming in the parks every day, and they're now spending, I will say this, the previous quarter they reported that per capita spending in the parks was up by 30% year over year. In this new quarter, year over year to the previous first quarter of the last fiscal year, it's up 40% per capita.
So people are spending the money. So let's get down to the basics here, which is, you know, I know that there are people that are upset that about the prices around the parks and how it's harder for many families to afford it. And they're right. Walt Disney wanted this to be the parks to be an experience for all families. He wanted it to be universal. They're not wrong about that. And I know there were some people that even want to try to remove Choy Pick over this on the shareholder vote, right? I didn't think they were going to be able to pull that off. I don't think they're going to be able to pull that off, but that's another part of the conversation. But they are looking purely from the point of view of a corporation, which is, this is economics 101, guys, stuff we learned in high school when we were 15, 16 years old, which is, you know, demand and demand and supply, right? And so it's very basic curve here. They're going to keep testing to see how far they can take it, and as long as people are willing to pay it, they'll take it there. But, you know, this is not some evil conspiracy. The moment you decide, it's too much for me, I don't want to pay it, and people start pulling back, they're going to pull the prices down. This is just supply and demand.
Exactly.
There's no evil conspiracy to mess you up. If you don't feel if you feel the prices are too high, you want to go, don't go. More than enough people do that. Chapin will be like, okay, the numbers aren't working out. We got to now adjust that. That's all this is. It's just a response to the market.
Right. It's exactly what you said. It's a response to the market and the fact that they know they can get it at least right now. They know there's a lot of pent up a desire to get out there.
Yeah, after the last 2 years, people will pay a premium just to get some kind of normalcy.
Yeah, and a lot of the parks out there, not just Disney, but the other parks that are in the Orlando, Tampa areas all around the country where they were able to open up theme parks, roller coaster parks, had very good attendance over the holidays. I know Universal had a very good quarter as well for their parks. It's across the board, and they know that they're going to try to get what they can get while they can get it. And I found the other interesting thing is that, and this would go for at least the bigger parks, especially the ones in Orlando. They still don't have the overwhelming, if not almost all of their international audience back. None of them have come back yet because they can't travel. They still have travel restrictions.
And so now keep in mind, that's part of the balancing act of how they're trying to make money in this company. If they think they can't make money right now overseas, they're going to charge what they can here.
Right.
The way it is.
And to that end, I think once those travel restrictions do lift and people, maybe in the next year, maybe it might take 2 years, you're going to see another super surge of earnings in these parks again, because these international travelers, we know factually that they spend a good bit more per capita than even domestic audiences do, because they get on a plane, they fly over an ocean. This is usually a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Oh, they're going to enjoy it. They're going to throw extra cash at it.
Yeah, so Disney is really waiting for them to come back. And when you look at the numbers that Disney had this quarter for the parks compared to the last pre-COOF era quarter that they had, which was Q1 2020, they're almost all the way back there, and they have almost none of that international traffic in there, which is incredible. But let's go on to Disney Plus, because this is the next big thing, right? This is the thing and the analysts all want to look at is the subscriber numbers. I've been saying for a while, I think there's going to come a point when these analysts and all these people are going to have to kind of chill back and realize that the market will reach a point of saturation. They're going to look more for value. I think we started to see the inklings of that with Netflix on their report a few weeks ago. Disney gave a surprise. They had given guidance, and analysts were expecting around 7 million total net new subs just to Disney Plus, not including ESPN, not including Hulu. They got 12. And
That's
four
substantial. That's
substantial.
almost, what was that, 40% more?
It was huge. The biggest surprise was that at first, until I dove into the numbers, a casual glance, I said, well, they got a bunch more on Hotstar in India. And they got 4.1 million domestic US and Canadian subscribers. That's big. That's what they need. And of course, the other international markets they opened in, like Korea and Hong Kong and Taiwan, those are high revenue, high dollar markets as well, very much akin to US pricing. They really didn't add that many more in India this quarter and on the Hotstar system. And the other thing I really liked about this, which is brand new this year, they are really breaking down the numbers more like Netflix and HBO Max does, region by region. Every region has its own RPU. They're breaking out subscribers in each region now. We've never had that up to this point. They have never been this transparent. This is another thing that Chapek is moving towards. And I think they talked about this on the call a lot, was putting a lot more, not every bit of fine detail, but putting more fine detail in their reports in key areas for people to see, which I think is great. So look, it's very promising. It's very promising because this is really Chapek under the new regime, which is the Susan Arnold regime. And my understanding is on the call, he started off the call with going over the new pillars that he established in that letter. That I hadn't heard that part of the call, but I understand that's what he did. Yep,
so that's important. I mean, he's reestablished the pillars that are the audiences are North Star, and we were not going to go against them. To start the call with that means that wasn't puffery. He really is trying to say, we are going to feed our audience. I know my predecessors might not have made that a priority, but that is the foundation of the company under me and my boss, Ms. Arnold, right? And I think it's going to lead to even better numbers quarter upon quarter, because we're all beginning to see them making choices. I mean, if I can briefly reference, just on my Patreon today, I've just put out this afternoon an article about Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast was going to have a prequel show that was about to go into shooting. That was going on Disney Plus. They had been casting. They had Josh Gad, other people from the original, from the movie, from the live action movie involved. They just cast Rita Ora, who's the big singer. She's going to play a big role. That she just cast her maybe 2 or 3 days ago, and suddenly, out of nowhere, in the middle of casting for production, Disney says, we're putting this on indefinite hold for creative and scheduling purposes. Now, that is corporate speak for this is done. It's not indefinite, it's done. We don't like it. We don't like this underlying material. That for them to even say, normally you just say for scheduling reasons, our stars can't do it or this or that. You said creative reasons, means they don't like it. They don't like it. It means that they don't think the audience wants this. A lot of people are like, I didn't even know that there was a prequel series. I didn't ask for it. There's no audience demand for this. And so to Beauty and the Beast prequel. And what a shock. Now with Bob Chapek, and right after the earnings call, within 24 hours of the earnings call, you've got this show that was supposed to be in production in a few days, pulled off the roster permanently, right? Because they realized that's not what the audience, the North Star, wants. It's not worth putting any more money into it. This, the Iger regime was trapped in the sunk cost fallacy, which is, as we know from our business school training, it's the idea is you put in so much money into this, you can't abandon it. So you throw more money after, more money after bad money until you burn it all down and find some way of at least keeping the loss to a minimum. That's how Iger ran that place. I mean, it was a casino, and that's craziness. And Chapek isn't going to run it like that.
One of the things that's interesting is with this Beauty and the Beast situation, I have to wonder what the production budget for something like this was. I believe it was supposed to be 8 episodes. And 8 episodes, you got to figure with costumes, potentially location shooting, all this kind of stuff. I mean, I don't think it's out of the ballpark to consider we're up in the $100 million range here.
You're talking about Star Wars kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's what I would think. Now, you shared this story with me earlier, and as I was reading it, it's something stuck out in my head that Chapek said on the call yesterday, and I think it may have been during the Q&A.
Okay.
And it was basically talking about how they were going to be increasing the content on Disney Plus, and I'm paraphrasing, by bringing in effectively more of their library that is expiring from other leases outside of Disney. So, for example, they mentioned Grownish, Blackish, and The Wonder Years. More episodes of all of those that I suppose now are being leased out to other services. Those are going to be brought into Disney Plus. I think there's more of that coming, because one of the things that he said was roughly 60% of the views on Disney Plus are general audience, or like what he calls general programming.
So people are just coming in to watch what's on there. It's not like I have to see only Star Wars. People want to see what's on Disney Plus. Okay.
Yeah. Only less than 40% or so are what he calls the franchise shows, or the Marvels, the Star Wars, the stuff like things like that. So you still, the bulk of the audience is what it is. I also found it interesting that he said that 50% of Disney Plus subscribers do not have children.
Okay.
Which is more than I thought it was. That really surprised me. I thought it might be 30 to 40%. I didn't realize it was as much as 50. So again, this goes back into the programming issue. He's talked about this for the last 2 meetings now. 340 productions underway right now for Disney Plus. So now apparently it's 339. So
well, but let's halt for 1 second there, because that has creative implications. If I know that the majority of my viewers, 60%, don't have children, then suddenly I have to think, should I be making this a kiddie show? Half of them, yeah. One of the critiques that people have had of Boba Fett is that, at least for the early part of it, it felt like a kiddie show, right? It felt like Boba Fett was pulling his punches and not being the ruthless bounty hunter. And as we evolved, and certainly there's a lot of death and mayhem in the final episode, whatever one may think of its quality, there's a lot of death and mayhem. There's no kiddiness about it in many ways. And so I think that when we just talk about the Star Wars audience, I think most of the Star Wars audience would appreciate a more sophisticated adult fare, right? That's what they're expecting from that world, because it is a world where people's arms get chopped off and, and all that stuff. And that's the world that George Lucas established. And it's a world really for adults who are children at heart. That's what that world is, right?
Yes.
If the data that they now have suggests that at least half their audience doesn't have children, then any executive that's pushing for we've got to make this more kid friendly is going against the actual data they have. And when I worked on Tron Uprising 10 years ago, one of the problems that I had there was I was trying to make a sophisticated adult show that kids would be entertained by, but it was aimed for adults. And they wanted to make it a kiddie show. They didn't want to make a sophisticated show that adults would be interested in, which was a mistake. And the show didn't survive more than 1 season because adults said, well, I don't want to watch this. Because the adults were the ones that knew the original franchise. Kids didn't know it, right?
Exactly.
And so, but now he's got the data to support that.
And that's why this whole issue jumps out at me. Not only for that, but because I can see them spending $100 million on a Star Wars show, on a Marvel show, because those are the big blockbuster. Those are the franchise viewers that he's talking about. Yeah. But you don't have to generate 10 pieces of content a year for Marvel. You don't have to generate 10 pieces a year for Star Wars. It'd be nice, but $100 million a pop in that vein, it gets expensive fast. Yes. And they've already committed to, I think, $13 or $15 billion over the next several years that they're going to dump into Disney Plus on top of the billions of marketing they already are, to produce this just mass of more content. But with this show, I look at it and I say, okay, this is an expensive show. It's on location. It's, you've got name brand actors in this thing. You got some A-listers. It looks like it could be a good show, but is it $100 million good show for Disney Plus? Maybe, maybe not. And I wonder if that's not part of some of the thinking here, is really reassessing where they're spending, because if they can get away with bringing in new subs and retaining subs with just really good content that's far less costly to make, they're gonna do it. So, and I think it sounds like they're directing their big budget stuff into the big franchise stuff.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, a lot of people are like, well, I didn't even know there's a Beauty and the Beast prequel coming. It really didn't hit the market, right? People didn't know that, right? But it's gotten so far along, they were casting it. That's how far along it got, right? And people didn't know. Whereas everyone, for better or worse, has their eyes on Star Wars and Marvel and is aware of everything that's happening, or at least publicly happening in those franchises, and has quite passionate about it. So that if that's where the PR is going to be, you put your money there, right? It's just practical.
That's what I would think. And I think that's part of it. And of course, like anything else, as time goes on, we'll probably find out more and more.
Yeah.
But when you look, I mean, you've got, you know, Luke Evans, Josh Gad were both producers on this, as well as being in it. They played Gaston and LeFou, I think, in the original movie, right? It's been so long since I've seen it. I can't, not the original cartoon movie, but the live action.
The animated,
yeah.
So the live action part, yes.
Yeah. And I just, and maybe they looked at it and said, look, this is, you know, and Matt, that might be part of it, is like, look, we can still do this show, but we ain't going to throw $100 million at it. We'll throw 50. You're going to have to reconfigure this for 50 million. Let's see. Because one of the things for sure that was a huge hit on Disney Plus was Encanto. That surprised me. I mean, it did very poorly in the theaters. By the way, the theatrical distribution and television distribution posted an even larger operating loss this quarter than they did the previous quarter. It went from 65 million loss to now 98 million loss.
Tragedy. I love theaters, but that's reality.
Yeah, well, it is. But again, talking about Disney specifically, of course, and this is, they stipulated this on the call, obviously the losses came from lower than expected theatrical revenues. Think Eternals, think Encanto, think that was that quarter, guys and girls out there. We told you. It was offset, of course, by some distribution income for some of the television content they still have licensed out. But going back to how we started this, the next thing that was said was they were giving forward guidance for the back half of the year. They expected that revenue from television distribution to decrease as they recouped some of those leases back, basically, and take that content and move it into Disney Plus, which means they're no longer going to be collecting paychecks from places like Netflix or TBS or fill in the blank, whatever. Anything that's not Disney that they've licensed some of their content out to, some of the library, not just their stuff, but the Fox stuff they acquired, all that. They're bringing that home. There's going to be more and more stuff they're bringing home to Disney Plus. So they expect that to continue to come down. And this is also why they're still a little bit leery about putting the kids' movies out in the theaters, because they're not hitting the mark there. But apparently, you know, for as bad as Encanto did in the theaters, it's apparently done gangbusters on Disney Plus.
So proving that Bob Chapek was right. And I say that as someone who is a passionate supporter of theaters. Yeah. I love theaters. I want theaters to prosper. Right. I want them to be, and I believe they will continue to be a major part of our viewing experience moving forward after this experience we've been through. But he was not wrong, and he was not wrong on when he did the Black Widow movie. He wasn't wrong. It made more money the way he did it. Ultimately, that's how he was able to settle out with Scarlett Johansson. It made more money, as we later proved with Shang-Chi and others. He was like, all right, you want theatrical? Yeah, see what happens? And Encanto has proven his point again. There are some projects that are going to be getting their bulk of their funds from streaming, and that's okay. They just need to be able to gauge which ones go where.
And to that end, going back to this thing with Beauty and the Beast, I think that's where it's playing in, because Encanto, of course, this was like a lot of these Pixar movies. I know that was Disney Animation Studios. Those things usually walk out the door with $150 million budget to start. Yeah. Big budgets. Yeah. Again, I think we'll see more of that stuff coming to Disney Plus. Yeah. But I think they're going to start reeling back on the budgets for some of those things, because we've seen other animated films come out that do very well at the box office, like Sing 2, that costs $85 million production budget. I think that's where they're moving towards. Like, look, if people are going to be happy with this, if we don't have to spend this much, and especially I believe the prices tend to come down when you're not committed to a theatrical release. Yeah. And Chapek said this in the call today. He said, look, paraphrasing again, but basically he said, my strategy was right, just like you said, Cameron. I said that we needed to remain flexible. The flexibility has proven to bear out, and that, Multiverse of Madness, Doctor Strange 2 will definitely be a theatrical exclusive. Those big franchise pieces, the Marvel stuff, things like that, those will still be theatrically exclusive. But when it comes to the animated movies and things like that, like some of the quote unquote, let's call it lower tier things where they can try to pull production budgets down and just shelve them out to Disney Plus, which means they're not really making any revenue from it by sending it over to Disney Plus. It's an accounting move inside of on a ledger Okay. But the point is, I think that's why the budgets have to come down on producing those things. But that's what you're going to see. You're going to have a hybrid model, and I think theaters are going to look more like they did 30 years ago, with much fewer titles in release instead of the spaghetti against the wall that we have now, or have had up until Coof.
Yeah.
So
and look, all of this is good. It's good. It's smart people beginning to adjust to the realities of the world. That's what business is supposed to be. We're coming out of a bizarre moment where everyone was flush with cash, borrowed cash under Iger, and spending like a crazy sailor, thinking you never have to pay the credit card. That wasn't a rational or sustainable business model. And at the end of a decade of that, we're in a bad place. And now we've got a smart guy and an even smarter woman on top of him, putting it back on track, and we're seeing the numbers. We're seeing the numbers right now. The moment that they're really in control, Mr. Iger's off. Look at what's happening.
Yeah. Look, Chapek knows that Disney needs to skinny up in terms of what they're spending. And the last 2 years have absolutely taught them that, as well as a lot of other businesses out there that were decimated with what went on. And I think that's a big, big part of it. But at the end of the day, the thing that Chapek has walked into this job being saddled with is this responsibility from the previous CEO and chairman that they have, they have to hit that guidance of 230 million subs on D+ by the end of fiscal year 2024.
It's coming up.
It's going to be here faster than we know it. He's got 2.5 years at this point, two and 3/4 years at this point to do it. Not a long time. They feel confident they're still going to hit that guidance as they open up in more markets, as they put more content on there. But that's why we're seeing some of these decisions that are being made, because this is what the market is demanding: is streaming. And that's what they're laser focused on. And as far as the parks go, like we said, as long as people keep showing up, if they keep paying the bill, if they keep spending money, if Disney keeps getting customer satisfaction surveys that are very high, which they apparently are. I realize there's some folks that are disgruntled, but it doesn't seem to be enough at this point to make a dent. And I don't mean that to offend anyone, because I'm just talking the math. But at some point, that worm may turn if they go too far. And again, like we talked about, that may be the first inkling that we see with the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel. It was all booked up, and then people saw a video on YouTube, and all of a sudden that price value went.
And again, that was developed. And that thing is, we have to remember, the movies and television take a year or two to course correct.
Yep.
That thing's years in development. That's a Bob Iger thing and a Kathleen Kennedy thing, and that years in development.
5-6 years ago,
it's like creating the Empire State Building. It takes time to build that thing, and now you're like, oh, people are seeing the Empire State Building and they don't like what's inside of it. Okay, well, it's going to take a while to rebuild that thing, and so it's going to be slower on that. But the important thing is they are going to react to the fact that this galactic whatever is not what people want. Yeah. And they're going to adjust, but it will be slower than people want. That's when, I even had some good people on my Patreon are Disney shareholders, and they DM me saying that I'm going to vote to remove Chapek because there was this movement by some individual shareholders to try to do that. I said, I wish you well. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you have the leverage right now. And with time, what's going to Bob Chapek is aware that the people, he's very savvy to what's happening both in Hollywood and in his investor base, including he knows about the disgruntled shareholders. He knows that.
So every CEO has those to deal with. Every single one of them.
And he knows that. And he's aware that people don't like the Star Wars hotel. He knows that. We know it. He knows more about it, right? He has more information about how much they don't like it. He knows that. So he will adjust it with time, with his North Star of the audience he's established. But to fix a park and a hotel takes a long time. So,
very much.
If you're grumbling that he's the guy that screwed it up, you're grumbling about something that his predecessor put in motion 5 years ago. And it's going to take maybe at least 3 years to fix it. Yep. So that's just the reality of it. And if you think removing that guy is going to accelerate that, it won't. It'll slow down the process.
It'll delay it. Yeah. And I said this in a video I did on the hotel, the Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel, I guess a month or two ago now, when Drunk 3PO Park Hoppin started talking about it. And I think I even told Jay this. I said, look, it's a point of they have numbers. Once the reservations fall below a certain threshold and remain there, that triggers step one, and that might be reducing prices. Step two might be we have to give more discount days. Step 3 might be we have to start changing things in the hotel. But for right now, they've got hundreds of millions of dollars sunk in that thing. Yeah. They've got to get cash flows coming in. They've got to sell what they've got. This is what they have right now. They're going to get those early adopters. They're going to get everybody back in. And until that flow of traffic really starts dwindling, nothing's going to change there. So we have to wait and see how long
we see that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like I said, if we get to this point, if we're this time next year in the second season and they the hotel's floating around 40 and 50% capacity, you're going to start seeing some changes, some big changes.
And you will, because it's just economics. It's fascinating because I was actually reading today about some of it. I'm even writing something on Patreon about this, but what we actually been through is this strange moment in history that a scholar was talking about, that there was actually a failed economic theory that reapplied recently. It's a theory that came from the 1930s. It was an economic theory called stakeholder capitalism, which is essentially a kind of socialism / fascism, where you would have a group of people that knew who all the stakeholders were and would answer to their needs rather than the needs of shareholders. That's what Disney's been doing for the last decade. It had some people at the top thinking, we know who the stakeholders are. There's this social group and that social group and this part of society. There are stakeholders, but no one's talking about the shareholders, right? Which is what the new conversation is with Bob Chapek, is he's talking about the shareholders now, right? He even throw out the word. He even said it, I think, in his letter. He said, we have all of these stakeholders, using the very term of this failed economic theory. We have all of these stakeholders, but we have to answer to our shareholders. That's the shift.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and read that memo. I'm trying to remember the language, but I think you might be. Yeah, I remember
because I saw the stakeholder language. And then today I was just reading this economist pointing out that this language comes out of failed economic theories from the 1930s, where various economists in Europe had been pushing. Essentially, it was fascism. It was the 1930s, right? And so they were pushing,
very popular back then.
Yeah, and they were pushing the economic theory to justify fascism, the rise of fascism in Europe, and it was all about how you needed wise patrician leaders who knew the stakes involved and who knew what companies needed, all the stakeholders of the company. And stakeholder is essentially talking about society has a stake in the company's performance. So that's fascism, right? The government will control it for your best interest. And essentially we got there where people, at least who created a mini government within Disney, decided, I need to address this social issue and that social issue because all of these stakeholders in society are impacted by my choices, rather than how is this impacting the people that actually own the company. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. At the end of the day, it is about the people that own the company. They expect results, as Ray Stantz would say.
And you can only have that kind of theory when the money is flowing. By the 1930s, the money was flowing again, and Germany had somehow come out of this horrific period of collapse, and the money was flowing again. So now you have the theories that can have this kind of diluted misuse of that fund, which is what we had.
Yeah, I hope we're on the right track here with Chapek. I think we are. I think there's going to be some bumps in the road. The man is going to make mistakes. He's only human. He's going to, there's going to be some customers that aren't happy. I get that. If he keeps going down, the road of, if more and more customers, I should say, become more unhappy, there will reach a breaking point where things will change. And there is that, like I said in the intro, they're trying to find that point on the dial. It's ticking back and forth. Where do we maximize between the most customer satisfaction and the most cost savings? What's that magic point that we can deliver the best products we can for the lowest cost we can? What's that happy medium? They're trying to figure that out right now.
It's trial and error. And that's what we're seeing in the franchises that we've been unhappy about recently, like Star Wars. There's a lot of trial and error in trying to get this on the right track. I do believe with Mr. Chapek, Ms. Arnold now fully in charge, the things that are coming in the future, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, other things, are going to be consistently good. I'd like to believe that, because I hope so. that the much of the internal politics that the Boba Fett was created under last year, under the last remnants of the Iger regime, are now finished. There seems to be at least a unified vision. And no matter how much you may be working at Lucasfilm thinking that you can do whatever you want, when both the chairman and the CEO have a straight line agreement on where it's going, you're going to adjust to that.
Yeah, and I hope that's the case, is that, you've got somebody like Bergman in there that is going to try to do he can. And that doesn't mean that woke stuff goes away, folks. If they can sell
That's
woke, they will sell it. They will
culture.
sell it. They will sell it if they can make money off of it.
Yeah,
We've said that before.
Yeah.
But just give us good storytelling, give us good characters, give us the stuff we want. I would, like Cameron said, I want good Star Wars. That's just like what Echo Base says. All my friends say it's like we'd love to have good Star Wars. We'll be happy. That's it. Yeah. So
and Cameron, I like what's coming. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I know you've got to go too, but I wanted to thank you for coming on. And as always, make sure everybody goes and checks out Cameron Pasha's Patreon page. Please, the link will be in the description of the video below. Please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, hit that share button, hit that notification bell. And as always, leave a comment before you check out today. And until next time, folks, take care.